more than one. He is very, very rich. Verse 13. And not many days after, the younger son gathered all together, and took his journey into a far country, and there wasted his substance with riotous living. Key word there is wasted. Wasted. He has never wanted anything before. He's never been in want before. He's never wanted, then he probably doesn't know about wasting, right? He's always had plenty, because he's always been in his father's house. So he's always had more than enough, so he probably doesn't really truly understand about wasting. Now you guys know this sentence, waste not, want not. Very logical, isn't it?
Yeah.
Waste not, want not. Very logical. And yet here's the thing. He's already rich. He's rich already to start, which means that he wants not. Does that make sense?
Right.
He wants not. He has never wanted. So if he wants not, then there is no logical connection to waste not. Right? We understand waste not, want not. But he doesn't have that want not part in there, so how would he know anything about wasting? He's always had an easy life. I've got the children's story about Mount Washington. Mount Washington is home of the world's worst weather. This morning, the temperature was 9 degrees. The wind was blowing at 59 miles per hour, making a wind chill of 19 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit, and the gusts were up to 67 miles per hour. And yes, it was snowing. It's April, and that's normal weather for Mount Washington. It's home of the world's worst weather. About 100 days out of the year on average, they're having wind over 75 miles an hour, which is hurricane strength. It's Mount Washington. Horrible weather. Long ago, I don't think people understood, and even now it's hard for us to imagine and comprehend just how bad the weather is up there. Many years ago, back in the late 1700s, Lizzie was a 20-year-old girl. Her father was a judge in New England, very good position, plenty of money in that family, and her thing that she wanted was to go sleep in a motel, the hotel up on the top of Mount Washington. If you went up to the top of Mount Washington, there was a little hotel, not a high-demand kind of hotel with a lot of rooms, but some. And that's where she wanted to go, to the hotel up on the top of Mount Washington. Her Uncle George was a shipbuilder. He had plenty of money as well. And so her Uncle George and the family said, all right, we'll go. So she went with her cousins and her Uncle George. They got up to Mount Washington area. They were in New Hampshire, and it was some rainy days there. Having money, that was not a big concern because they could just stay at the hotel down at the bottom of the mountain there in Crawford Notch, or Pinnacle Notch. So just stay at the hotel there in Crawford Notch. After one of those days, they had lunch around 1 o'clock, and they looked outside, and it seemed like the weather was clearing. The weather was clearing, it seemed a little bit better, and so waving and smiling, Lizzie and George and her cousin Lucy took off. They left out of the hotel about 2 o'clock. And it seemed every few feet, Lizzie would turn around and wave to her family, her cousins, and folks there at the hotel as they set off for the top of the mountain. 4 p.m., 2 hours later, they were halfway up the mountain. That's actually making pretty good time. So 4 p.m., they're halfway up the mountain, but that's where the road ended. And then they went above the tree line. Mount Washington is in New Hampshire, but it's so far up into the air that it's above the tree line. And when they got above the tree line, they found that the wind was strong, so strong that they could hardly even stand up. They really had to lean into the wind in order to stand. But they kept on going across what they thought was Mount Washington, but it was mountain after mountain because there's still a ways to go to get to the top. The wind was strong. They were getting tired. The air was changing and it was getting dark and they were cold, very cold. They were on the path. They knew that they were on the path, but they didn't know where on the path they were. And so they laid down on the path. And so George would get up several times during the night and he would build a wall to kind of help stop the wind a little bit. And moving all those rocks around would get him kind of nice and hot. He'd lay down with Lizzie and his daughter Lucy to try to keep them warm. And then after a while he'd get up and build a wall some more and get more warm and then try to keep them warm. But around morning time, Lizzie died. Finally, once there was a little bit of light, and they could kind of sort of see George and Lucy stood up, and they walked from here to the other side of the parking lot, distance to the hotel.
Oh, wow.
So close, so close. They thought it would be fun. They didn't really understand that it would be hard. So many things in their life had been easy, had been fun, and it was a simple idea, but they were not really prepared for the hard times. They thought everything was easy. How wrong they were. Verse 14, Luke 15, verse 14. When he had spent all, there arose a mighty famine in that land, and he began to be in want. He began to be in want. That word began to be in want means that this is a new experience for him. He's never been in want before. This is a new experience for him. He's never experienced this before, and that's a key problem. That's a key problem because he's never been in want before. What's he going to do? You know, for me and for you, you must experience want in life. You must want something. Want is really important. Want is actually a driver. It's a motive that helps you go. That want makes you go. It's a motive, it's an emotion, it's a driver to action. And it's not the kind of want where, oh, I want that, I'll buy it. It's want. Because want is a new thing for this prodigal here, he doesn't know what to do. It's new experience for him. He doesn't know what to do. You know, many who grow up poor and then later become rich, they know exactly what to do. You ask them, they know exactly. You got to keep working. You save your money. You invest and you do this. And they know all the things that they need to do to keep going. They're driven to action. They know they want to keep going. They do not sit and wait to see what happens. This boy, he actually just sits down and waits to see the results of being in want. Because he doesn't know. Those who are once poor, they know, oh, I'm running out of money in this course, I'd better change course. Make some adjustments. He has no idea what to do. Verses 14 through 17. When he had spent all, there arose a mighty famine in that land, and he began to be in want. And he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country, and he sent him into his fields to feed swine. And he fain would have filled his belly with the husks that the swine did eat, and no man gave unto him. And when he came to himself, he said, how many hired servants of my father's have bread enough and to spare, and I perish with hunger? Here's some questions for you. How long was he feeding pigs? Why didn't he realize earlier he was going broke? I don't have answers for these. I just wonder. Why didn't he realize earlier he was going broke? Why didn't he just go home when he was broke? Instead of going to a pig farmer. Here's my question. Why do prodigals wander around near the Pinnacle? He's just wandering around. The answer here is because they have always had everything they wanted. That's why. That's why they wander around aimlessly around the Pinnacle. They've always had everything they wanted. Don't spoil kids. Don't spoil yourself. You must deprive yourself. You must be in want.
True.
It was a Wednesday, October 25, 1855. Dr. Ball was a world traveler. He'd been to many places throughout the entire world. But his home was in Boston, and he realized, I haven't been to Mount Washington, and that's not that far away. Very unique place in the world, I should go there. So he went from Boston up to Gorham in the rain. And then he heard that there was a road halfway up Mount Washington. And so he borrowed a horse there. And they said, there's a road halfway up, but don't go past that. Where that road ends, you really don't want to go past that. But Dr. Ball, he rode the horse to the notch, and there in the rains, and all he had for his shelter was his little umbrella. It was October, and it was pretty nice when he left Boston, but it was quite different when he got to Mount Washington area. So he walked up in the rain. He had an umbrella, and it was fairly easy going up the road. And so he kept going just a little bit beyond the road. And there, very quickly, he found that there was ice and snow. And it was getting dark. And so he turned around. He went back. He followed his steps back down through the ice and snow, back down to a little camp house. It was just camp house. Nobody was there. Very simple, not much there. And so he ate a little bit there, but he did not sleep there because the little camp house was a shelter, not much for heat or anything like that. And so he didn't want to sleep because he was a doctor. He understood hypothermia sets in if you're sleeping and you can die that way. So he didn't want to sleep. So the next day he woke up and he thought he's pretty close to the top. That was his thinking, fairly close to the top. And he thought, I could just go up again. And so he went up again. And he got back up into the cold and into the snow again. And the snow was there, but there wasn't any view there. He'd been all over the world and had seen so many things, and he really wanted a view from Mount Washington, or at least be able to see the top of Mount Washington. That doesn't really happen very often. It's home of the world's worst weather. But this was 1855, and maybe he didn't understand that it was a ways to go to the top. And there wasn't usually much of a view. So he went up a little bit higher. And he couldn't find the top. And then he couldn't find the way down either. Near the top of Mount Washington, there are several places where it's an alpine meadow. And so there's this meadow out there, and he couldn't find his way down either, so he was lost. But he did have his umbrella, and so he made himself a little camp. How comfortable can you be sleeping underneath an umbrella? Not much comfort, and he was lost. And he did not sleep that night because he knew that he didn't want to sleep. But he was lost, and so the next day when he woke up, he began to look around. And the meadow is really quite large. He walked one way, looked, and could not go down that way. Walked another way, and looked, and could not go down that way. And then as he was walking, looking for a way down, he realized it's getting dark again. He had spent the day looking for a way down, and so he returned and again made another camp underneath his little umbrella. So it's again the third night with no sleep. 3 nights, no sleeping in the cold and in the snow. And he knew that if he fell asleep even for a few moments, he would die. He was a doctor. His brain was working. And he knew that if he slept, he would die. So he put his elbow on a very sharp, pointy rock. And then put his head on his elbow. And if he fell asleep, the pain in his elbow would wake him up. And so that's the way he spent the night. If he fell asleep, the pain right there in the elbow would wake him up. And so he did not sleep. The 4th day, he was found by the searchers who had gone looking for him. Only after he arrived at the hotel and eating did he finally sleep, but not very deeply. He refused to allow himself to go to sleep deeply. He actually hired somebody to sit in a room and poke him every 10 minutes and make him wake up. Because he knew that he had to be awake and not too comfortable if he was going to live. Can't be too comfortable if he's going to live. I think those lessons apply to us as well. Luke 15, 17 through 18. When he came to himself, he said, how many hired servants of my father's have bread enough and to spare, and I perish with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and will say unto him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before thee. This is probably the second time in his life that he has ever had a course of action. I say this is probably his second plan because his first course of action, his first plan may have been in verse 13 when he left. But that one may not have been really planned out very well. That wasn't a very good plan, course of action there. Kind of like the boys in the children's story. They didn't have much of a plan, and what plan they did have was just a bad plan. But now the prodigal has a real plan. He has a course of action. He's returning to his father. Now he has a plan to return to his father. Revelation chapter 3, verse 15. Revelation 3, verse 15. I know thy works, that thou art neither cold nor hot. I would thou wert cold or hot. What's the problem with Laodicea? No real course of action. Just drifting along. Just drifting along. Verse 17. Because thou sayest, I am rich, and increased with goods, and have need of nothing, and knowest not that thou art wretched and miserable, poor, blind, and naked. The claim is to be rich. Doesn't know anything about being in want. Laodicea says, no, we don't know anything about being in want. We're rich. We have plenty. Unfortunately, doesn't realize that we're on a course to be in want. Verse 17, wretched and miserable, poor, blind, and naked. Doesn't that describe the prodigal in the pig pen?
Yeah.
I think that describes the prodigal in the pig pen. And so now needs to come to self and get up. That's our need. That's the need of Laodicea. Need to come to self and get up. Verse 18, I counsel thee to buy me gold tried in the fire, that thou mayest be rich, and white raiment, that thou mayest be clothed, and that the shame of thy nakedness do not appear. And anoint thine eyes with eye salve, that thou mayest see. Get going. That's the plan. The prodigal says, I'm going to get going. I'm going to head back to the Father. Verse 18 here says, yes, here's the plan. Get back to the Father. Get this spiritual treatment that's needed.
Amen.
Verses 20 and 21, behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man hear my voice and open the door, I will come into him, and will sup with him, and he with me. To him that overcomes will I grant to sit with me in my throne, even as I also overcame, and have sat down with my Father in his throne. Did you realize that this is a party invitation? He is inviting and saying, look, if you return home, then there's a party. If you'll open up that door and have a relationship, then there's a party. You can have a meal, a good time together. If you're content with your relationship with God, then you'll be lost.
Amen.
If you're content with your relationship with God, you'll be lost. You must want, key word there, you must want a better relationship. You must drive yourself to have a closer relationship. You realize you may have to be uncomfortable and deprive yourself. Here's a suggestion. This week, coming up on Thursday, April 12th, let's have a day of prayer and fasting here. I'll be here from 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock in the morning. That's a little bit early, perhaps, but that way there we can have time together in the morning, and then you can go back to some of the things that you need to do during the day. So you can write that down. April 12th, a day of prayer and fasting here from 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock in the morning. We'll meet and we'll pray together. Now I know that's a little bit early, and I know the idea of praying together for an hour sounds like could be a bit long. I have some plans so that way there we're moving, we're not sleeping. Just like Dr. Ball, there's things that he did to keep himself awake, right? We'll be able to keep ourselves awake. We'll have a good time. We'll pray, and it will be a good blessing for us here. So if you can come, that'll be good. And then another time would be 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock. I realize Sonny and the kids may not join me at the early morning time, but maybe later in the day works better for some, right? I know one man who joined a prayer time like this early in the morning but couldn't come during the day because he was working. I understand. So it doesn't mean that you're necessarily able to come to all of the times, but come to the ones that you can. From 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock, I've chosen that time because, again, that's near a meal time. So maybe just kind of put the prayer instead of your meal. So 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock. And then it's a Thursday. April 12th is a Thursday. If you can come early, like maybe around 5:30 or something, and we can have a little bit of time together then. Maybe music, maybe more prayer, maybe some other things that we'll read or talk about, but we'll have some time together. We'll enjoy that for a little bit. And then, if you can't come to any of those things, that's okay. We'll still have our midweek study time from 6:30 to 7:30. We've gone through some of the longer chapters in our discipleship handbook, so again, it should return to an hour-long time period. So from 6:30 to 7:30, we'll have our midweek study. So that'll be on Thursday, a day of prayer and fasting. The idea of fasting doesn't really sound that comfortable, doesn't really sound that fun, but sometimes we must deprive ourselves. We must be in want to build our relationship with God. You know, for the prodigal, he got up and he went to God. For us, we can get up, we can go to God, we can turn to Him, and the nice thing is He will welcome us every single time. Our closing hymn is number 512, hymn 512.